icy tub.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was cool.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I was like,
Oh, sorry,
I came in
that
there.
probably isn't the word I should use.
I missed the beginning of this sentence. You just said I like.
Does any-
get into an icy tub?
Yeah.
Is that how you wake up in the morning?
End of the monologue.
Oh, okay.
What's his face? Thanos? Josh Brolin.
Yeah, Josh Brolin.
Talks about how he loves doing ice soaks.
Oh, okay.
And so he starts taking off his clothes. And I'm thinking, you know, Lauren's probably going, they either worked this out or Lauren's thinking, dude, this is live TV. So he strips down to the basics, leaves his socks on, which shows he is familiar with New York, and climbs into this, they bring out this like 5-foot tub, and then it's water, but ice water, and he just soaks right into it.
Right.
Well,
Oh, this is great.
and once.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say.
When I was like 14, just on a dare, I moved into the canal where I lived, and it was February.
Yes.
And this is back when there was indeed a winter,
Right.
and you shouldn't do that.
Yes. No, I mean, we have the Coney Island in New Year's, Coney Island, they'll go
Oh,
swimming.
no, that's insane.
Yes.
But it makes me kind of, it's like, now I understand why everybody was so pissed off on the Titanic.
Well, yeah.
Aside from
At least what we hear. What we hear, they were pissed off.
Well, the survivors wrote notes.
Yeah. There was a lot of skeletons given the favor at the bottom of the ocean. There was a lot of that going on.
Look, when we were doing the hard opener, it's like when they started doing, they did someone do a quick recap of Joe's speech, and then they cut to Marjorie to the, what's her face, the senator from Alabama.
Alabama, Katie
But,
Wood, yeah.
and I'm trying to think, she looks awfully familiar, and I can't, and then right at the end, she did this grin and this laugh, and I thought, that's Scarlett Johansson. Is she the host? I'm losing it. No, she wasn't the host, she wasn't even there at the close.
Was this last night? I was out drinking, so I missed all that shit.
Well, obviously, somebody, she before she got on stage.
She's married to the head writer, that's why.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Oh,
That's
right,
Yeah.
right.
Colin Jones or
The guy with the curly hair.
They terrorize him about that all the time. Yeah, it's pretty good TV when they're terrorizing each other.
Well, yeah, and it's live, you can't.
Oh, okay. All right, because you missed that hour of sleep. Anybody that's really bored, that's a knockout. And what is this panel called? Do you guys remember?
Yeah, it's called Table for Three, which is why there's 4 of us up here.
Table for 3. It's like all the reservations all weekend.
Yeah.
It's like, we have one more, is that okay?
Well, that actually happened to us.
Well, I was afraid that nobody would show up, so I brought my family, my sister, and my nieces, you know, and everybody, we want to fill up some space, so I told them every time I said something,
See,
laugh really loud, like it
It's
was.
like a row of troublemakers, right? It's like, all I see is a row of troublemakers. I don't see family, I see like trouble.
And also, when you
family
started
now.
your career by defining success in the comic book industry, you can get away with stuff like this.
My family says it's like, their favorite saying is you can't drink all day if you don't start first thing in the morning, so they can drink for a while.
Are we talking day here or day in West?
There's no hangover if you never go to sleep. That's my rule.
And if you just follow, if you're moving at 1,000 miles an hour, just following the revolution of the earth, time doesn't pass, you can keep going forever.
But what is the panel about it?
So we sit at a table and we talk to each other like we're doing now, I guess, right? Or we interact with the audience.
I think we could do
Does
that.
anybody have a program?
It's kind of.
No, it's table something and 3, I'm saying 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of these?
Maybe one of us died and we think we're on a panel. And it's actually only 3 people up here, and it's the ghost is sitting there.
It's the darker side of comics.
No, we did that the other day.
No, this is the sequel.
Oh, the sequel to that.
We are figments of John Rice Davies' imagination.
That's it.
He's sitting up in the green room going, yes, dear boy.
Live from New York, it's Saturday Night Live!
I will say,
No, Sunday, actually.
I will say this morning, I got in before 10, and when I opened the doors, it was like a stampede of people running towards the celebrity part. Did anybody see that?
Yeah.
It was like people that never ran before. were running. To get online. Like, it was,
Yay!
oh, no,
Sure.
yeah, well, they went to see the Fonz, I guess. But yeah,
No, it's like we're running in the bulls and Pangona.
that's the nicer way of saying it.
Very slow bowls, though.
Yeah, well,
No, but after the running of the bulls, you have the cleaning of the bulls. Souvenirs,
I'm a New Yorker, so when I see everybody running, I get in line and run with them, because I figure I would understand that way is bad, you know, so I just join the running.
On the other hand,
Unless it's a marathon, and I go back to sleep.
he's a New Yorker, I'm from Brooklyn, you just get out of the way.
No?
So you want to just
How
go?
are you doing?
You New Yorkers. What am I?
I mean,
New Yorkers, New York's part of Brooklyn.
I'm from Florida now, which is the 6th borough of
Yeah,
New York.
I-
So you guys understand, it's 5.
But then why are you so confused by putting all of your high rises above the low tide mark, but below the high tide mark, and they're all glass?
Obviously, I'm not the governor of Florida. I don't have heels, I don't wear heels, I don't yell at women all day long, I don't argue with reporters, I stay home and do comics. It's a lot easier.
He has heels?
Yeah, he wears heels, you know those white boots that Ron DeSantis
It's
was
just,
wearing?
it's lips, he's really short, so he wears lips.
Yeah, he's angry, I don't know what he's angry. Well, like, go to the beach.
So Josh Brolin can strip down to his underwear on national TV.
So can Chris Claremont. Everybody, let's go.
I shower with the lights off, I don't know. So this panel, I guess, is, like we did last year, was sort of industry insider, sort of personal experiences, things that we've done, because we all represent a widely interesting spectrum of comic book history.
Yes.
And that's all I got to say. No, so
We officially fulfilled our contracts, and now we can talk about anything we like.
Do you want to just throw it open to the audience?
well,
Yeah.
do you guys want to reintroduce yourselves, just for anybody who
Oh, yeah.
doesn't know, or just we start with Chris?
I'm Josh Brolin.
Colin Joyce, I'm Scarlett Johansson.
I was going to say I was Diane Lane, but rolling.
All right, since I'm actually not on the list, my name is Mark Waid, in case you know.
Hey.
Many.
Thank you. And to the end,
How long have you've been writing comics for a long time?
40 years.
40 years.
40 years. I broke in 1984.
Hey, you're just a kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Chris, you've hit the 50-year mark a little while ago, right?
I don't know, let's see, I
72,
started in 1968. I'm sure you were all alive back then.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's funny, because that was, 1984 was the year that Peter and I self-published the first issue of the Turtles, so
Yeah.
we've sort of been around since then.
More movies than the rest of us put together.
And I'm new to this.
And all of them really good.
Mine was 91, so officially getting paid for comics. Many years I worked in comics, but I never got paid. A couple of years, but 91 is when I actually got a check for it.
So you did, you said, were you doing some, not apprentice, what do you call it? Like
Ghosting?
Ghosting stuff?
Yeah, I ghosted
Did you
in high
do
school.
that?
And I ghosted when I was in high school for Chickstone and for Dave Simons, and I was in 11th grade in Gene Coleman, Howard the Duck pages after school,
After school.
and then not getting paid for it, or the guys give me $5 for it. I was dealing. Dave was a great guy, no longer with us, but he had a bunch of other guys in the studio, and they taught me what not to be in life. And so they were great examples of how not to do the rest of my life, because they were like, 4 guys lived in an apartment the size of this table with a little more, and I used to go there and pick up anything I could do because I wanted to learn. You know, I was in high school, I just wanted to learn how to do comics. And one day I asked them, I said, where do you guys sleep? Like, you all live in this one-room apartment with a tiny bathroom. And I realized that the walls were the mattresses standing up. And they all had reference art on the bottom of the mattresses, and then at night they dropped the mattresses down, and they go to sleep on it, and it filled the whole apartment.
Wow.
And then in the summer, I remember, I think Mondo Gill was one of the guys in there, he would sleep on the fire escape to get a little air. But it was like, and I said, I remember I had the conversation with my dad, I'm like, you know, I'm working with these guys, but they all do comics, but they live in one apartment. My dad's like, maybe you want to rethink what you do for it. Because I already came from, like, we didn't have money in our family.
Right, but maybe it's not as glamorous as you think it is.
No, it was definitely not glamorous, and I would go there, and I had a sandwich, and I had to share it with them, you know. It was that kind of bad. And I was a kid in high school, so it was like, I was like, what is this mess? So that's when I got into advertising until I was 30. And then I decided to try comics again. I think I figured out the way to make money.
And Kevin, we know your big break, but what led you to your big break?
Oh, it was just grew up loving reading children's books and discovered comic books. I lived in a really tiny town in Maine, paper route, and I remember being really pissed off once because at the time when they changed the price of comics from 15 cents to 20 cents. Because I could run out by less comics with my $3 cents. The $3 I made every month in paper route.
It's a lot less.
But discovering comics in general was just like, the college part of the angel sang and the sun shone. I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life, and I proclaim it to my family regularly to the point that they thought it was something wrong with me. And would often say, it's like, well, that's fine with this comic stuff, but you need to learn a trade, a career, because you'll never make a living doing comics. And you had a class. Even my dad told me once, we didn't have much money either. When I wanted to go to school, he said, I'll help pay whatever I can for colleges. You only need to go to any college, but as long as it's not art school. So
expensive.
I took it like either as inspiration or like, get a real job. But it was mini comics, self-publishing. We're very lucky at that time that was something that was just really evolving in a big way. Always loved underground comics. Discovering comics and heavy metal, living to underground comics, and self-publishing. And that was just a break that we put a comic out that was a parody of all the things we loved about comics. And it just as easily could have failed. And it was just one of those things, right place, right time, direct market distribution. We never planned a second issue, and the first issue sold enough. We gave back my uncle, who loaned us the money to do the comic. And then we had enough money left over to do Star Wars.
And then it sold enough to spawn 1 billion imitators.
Yeah.
When I was editing Amazing Heroes at the time, which was it's like Newsarama but on paper. It's like a website on paper. That was funnier in my head. We had fan magazines, and one of the things we did, this is summer of '86, so by that time, all the imitators were in full force, and every 2 weeks, bi-weekly magazine, every 2 weeks, we would do a little placard in the comic that said, industry held hostage, 24 black and white comics on the stands, 31, I think we got to 31 at some point, imitators of you.
Yeah, it was like, Peter, we kind of like 21, because again, we basically stole everything we loved about comics and, Claremonts and Millers and Kirby's and put it into this one parody that we stole so much from the Daredevil origin that was surprised that Marvel didn't sue us anyway. But when it sort of took off, I think people saw a way into the industry that they didn't have before. Because all of my early submissions were Marvel, DC, or Charlton and Archie and stuff. So people saw a way in and they figured if these two idiots can do it, then we can do it. And we followed behind Dave Sims, a parody element that he, drew this 1976. He started this crazy story about an aardvark that ran around and he drew like Barry Smith and he acted like Barry Smith and all the parody elements. We said, well, we could see a swap, so we did that with Frank Miller's Ronin and Daredevil and put all these things together. And so suddenly you got adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters and all the microwave prepubescent Bilfers, geriatric gerbils that just went on. It was 21 or 22 that we counted. And it went from...
These are all real titles, by the way.
Yes. Black and white.
When, it was, and I think what really caught on certainly with the comic market was this $1.50 comics now going for $20, $25, $30 in 1984, 1985. So it created this black and white boom and bust, which I think people still blame us for in many ways.
Well, I think Eternity was more responsible for the bust part.
Yeah.
Because they were putting out like thousands of books. And, I had a friend of mine, this real quick story, I had a friend of mine, his name was Lou Diamond, a guy in Brooklyn. And he had 2 long boxes of all your Turtles books, and he had 2 long boxes of all the Flaming Carrot comics, and he told me, he goes, these are going to be worth tons one day. And he was half right, he was half right. But I remember he telling me, he's like, dude, I'm telling you, all your first issues. And I was like, you're crazy, but okay,
No, I think we think even that, a lot of, by the time we were doing like issues 4 and 5 of Turtles, we were selling 40, 50,000 copies of a black and white comic, and it was like, that was just the most amazing thing ever. Just, both Peter and I were huge Kirby fans, and it was the dream to follow in the footsteps of so many people that inspired us to want to be in this business. And even, the 4 people in an apartment we thought that was kind of our future. Oh my God, so we have to do this to run. But suddenly we're making a living doing comics, and even as much amazing things that happened, in fact that 40 years later, I'm sure we're 40 years old this year, that I'm still doing this and making a living at it, and it's fulfilled that childhood dream that I feel like the luckiest guy in the world, because I get to do this every day. It's drawing before I flew, I'm playing account here, when I get home tomorrow night, I go back to the deadline, it says you do, and you do, and you.
Is this why you bring your whole family here, just to basically show them and rub it in their face?
So at least I can get to visit with them, you know?
They're all looking at the will.
Spending already on alcohol and hookers on.
Let's throw it off.
Yeah,
Questions?
Otherwise, we're kind of rambling.
Back over there. You.
Oh.
How has
I'll get you next, I promise. There you go.
how has the comics industry changed from when you all started to now? What have you observed?
Chris,
yes.
you've been the longest, take it.
Used to be fun.
Jimmy, bring the room up.
You know, I mean, it's like, I'm gonna say this before. When I was working for Marvel, I was getting paid train fare from Long Island to New York, just because Stan was about to tell me he couldn't hire me until I said I was doing this for college credit, and I couldn't ask for wages, and that was the fastest you're hired I've ever heard. A philosophy that still exists, only now it applies to the real people. But so I'm for the fun of it, I'm proofreading books. Well, proofreading books and reading the back issues, and I'm reading a Sergeant Fury, where he goes back to Brooklyn, and we get introduced to his mother and his brother, who's about to grow up and become Scorpion, his deadliest foe. And I'm reading this, and at the same time I'm reading the first dozen issues, one of which is the trial of Nick Fury, where the base minister gets up and says, "Well, you know, sir, Nick Fury is a good soldier, but after all, he is an orphan." Uh-oh. So I go into Roy's office and I say, "This is the situation. You know, we've established in the first year of the series that he's an orphan, yet now he has a mom and a family. What do we do?" He says, "Call Stan." "What do you mean? Call Stan, tell him." "Me? Yeah. But you found it, you tell him." And so I called him up and told him, and Stan said, "Fix it." Hung up. And Roy said, What did he say? And I said, "Fix it." You know, and he said, "Okay." "What do you mean, okay? You found it, you fix it." You know, I've been doing this for like 3 weeks. Tough. That was the reality. I mean, there were no rules. It was just, you found it, you fixed it, which I did.
So that's how comics has changed. We've fixed Nick Fury's origin. That's how
Oddly enough, just from my own career, I can list like dozens of points where I wasn't on the book, people took over the book, drew the wrong conclusion from a panel, and fucked up everything. But only from my perspective. The problem is, the difference between then and now was it was a looser and more exciting in its way reality. And no, we cared, but it was more along the lines of having fun. And what has gradually occurred over the succeeding years, not simply in comics, but in the world, is there are more and more rules. And while the rules are there for a good and noble purpose, it makes things very complicated. Just from a creative standpoint, in the old days we all used to hang out in the office. Not much got done, but we knew everybody. Everything was organic. You could pitch an idea and the right editor heard it, or the right artist was walking by the door at the right time, and suddenly you had a story, you had a series, you had a this. Now it's all very proper and structured, and it looks neat on a spreadsheet. And current generations are cool with that. Old farts, not so much. And I guess to the day he died, as I'm writing what is becoming the best-selling comic in the industry, he would ask me every time we got together, Chris, when are you going to get a substantial job? And the thing here is that it's trending toward making a more substantial job. The current reality, the people in the environment, they're used to it. Those of us who came before, not so much. That's all. And it's, you know.
There's less orgies now. I think because corporations took over the Marvel and DC.
And then bigger corporations took over the smaller corporations.
Right, and what for me has changed is the way people treat us. There's a sense that, well, there's a lot of ageism, number one, we get that all the time. But the other thing is that we're dealing with editors that are afraid to lose their job. So then, when you're afraid to lose your job, you don't perform great, right? Because you're watching your back all the time. So they're taking less risks. And then they're hiring safer people, and then they're following trends of what to hire and who to hire. And it's less about the stories and more about who they're hiring, or what they want from them. And then they're dictating more stories now than they used to. It used to be like, hey, you got any ideas? And we'd hit them with ideas. Now they want to tell us what to write. And then a lot of the writers coming in, when I was a kid, it was like, you know, Batman or Superman or X-Men or anything. You'd be like, I can't wait to write that character because, you know, I want to see them fight this person. And now it's like, oh, you know, I went to a bar mitzvah. I wonder what Batman would do in a bar mitzvah. Let me write Batman in a bar mitzvah. So it's like less about what the characters are driven by and more about what the writers bring to it. What's Batman?
Yes, but.
Yes.
Yes, but. I've made this observation many times.
Okay.
And this is the God's honest truth. I've done the math. There have been more stories told about Batman than about any other character in human history.
Even Wolverine.
Even Wolverine.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's 80 years. Well, and
Yeah.
more. I mean, how many Hercules stories are there? 3. But I mean, there's not, how many Santa Claus stories are there? 2. But that's it. Sherlock Holmes way outpaced Sherlock Holmes. So in their defense, it is really hard. to
Oh yeah,
get
no.
Batman.
I mean, Batman to me is one of the most boring characters because it's like, okay, Joker again. It's a loop.
This is really cool.
Well, Bruce Wayne comics would be awesome, and I actually pitched that, and me and Amanda pitched it, and they turned it down. So, but anyway, I find the newer stuff is more editorially driven, less writer driven, and I find you know, and the big difference is because I'm a collector too. I collect comics. I'm not a big fan of renumbering and starting numbers over. I mean, I take pride in having FF number 1 to 280, you know, and so it's. Whatever they do now to think to get people in, it usually loses a piece of the audience every time they do it. So my observation just is that to be creative, the creators should really be creative. They have to do their own thing these days, as opposed to working for corporate. Because what comics have, I mean, I remember we were doing Harley, and then at one point they said, you know, you have to change the color of her hair from black to red, and we're like, why? And they're like, well, because in the movie they got to do this. And I'm like, no, the rule is we do it, and the movie copies us. We don't copy the movies. I said, you know, they come to us for the ideas. We don't go to them for the ideas. I don't want to go look at a film. But that's like, well, Warner Brothers, they said you have to change the color of the hair. You know, it's like things like that never happens, right? Because usually, look, the good news is, you know, they don't let us work on the movies, but they also don't, the movie people don't tell us how to write the comics.
That's true.
But subversively, the companies tell us how to write the comics. And I just think I think the content is different in comics than it would be. And you know, I always have this conversation with people. They're like, when they don't like the new books, what they do is they go and buy back issues. And comic shops do really well with back issues because people looking to buy the stuff they never tried. So that's
Down volumes.
Yeah, about volumes. But I've seen it change where. And again, you mentioned it where it used to be we go to a con and everybody gets together and there's an editor or an editor-in-chief that would take everybody to dinner and we all have a big dinner and we talk about what we're doing. That doesn't really happen anymore. It's now small groups and less orgies. Okay.
I will say this though, on the upside, there are upsides.
Sure.
When I started, and you know, it was on staff at DC in like 86, 87, comics were for straight white guys. That's what comics were for. Every once in a while, we might accidentally have a girl walk into a comic shop. Oh my God, don't, all these guys in the corner huddling because they were afraid to go talk to the girl. People of color, people of different gender, they just didn't exist in comics as creators. As a general rule, Chris, you have to back me up on this. That's
No, because I work for the company that outsold yours. No,
Well, seriously, I'm
it's
wrong.
not a question, it's not.
There's a reason we're here in the middle.
No, it's not that, because the thing that drove me crazy, I'm sorry, Mark, is that X-Men consistently sold a third of its books to women, to people of color.
And how many other comics did that?
How many
Your
other
Sandman,
comics
X-Men,
took
that was
advantage
it.
of the opportunity to try to do that? That's
Right.
It's not the companies saying, don't do this.
No, no. That wasn't the point I was trying to make. It wasn't we were deliberately trying to sell to only a small part of the audience. Chris is clearly the exception in terms of his audience, but as a general rule, there were very few people of color, of different gender, in comics, producing comics. You give me that, very few, yes? And so what I've been impressed with, and we've still got a long way to go, obviously, but the strides we've made, especially in the last 10 years, in terms of diversity in creators and diversity in voices, and seeing comics that are made for people other than just old white fanboys, is really really positive.
That is truly, very true. I mean, a company like Milestone wouldn't exist
Right.
way back when.
But there's also a flip side to that, which is crazy, because when you have something like, say, Ms. Marvel, where you have a Muslim, where you have obviously a person of color, where you have a whole different dynamic from the standard paradigm, and it comes out and it's a success, and then the company decides, well, we're not sure it's a real success. We'll wait until we see the whole thing, and then we'll take 6.5 months to come up with the idea, well, maybe we'll do it again. And then they have to reboot it all over again. And then wait another 6 months to reboot it another. In the old days, if you got, I don't know, a book about a bunch of mutants, and it's sold, and you knew it by the second issue, the only reason we never went monthly with the third issue is because Dave didn't draw that fast. But we could take advantage of success. We could take advantage of, you could follow instincts. And that was that accounted for a large measure of Marvel's success. It accounted for a large measure of DC's success. And what happens now is, as Jimmy was saying, everybody's looking over their shoulder. They're waiting for an approval from up 5 levels. And by the time you get, Ms. Marvel should have come out, they should have greenlit it for a series, a monthly series. Boom, the minute they knew they had something. But they didn't. And the fact that it stayed popular over the course of the next 3 releases is a testament to the idea. But what a lot of wasted opportunity. Nobody's greedy anymore.
Kevin, please join in.
It's very, to me, it's you know, I look at the history of comics and sort of what my interest was and where I started, when I got into it, sort of had the discovery of heavy metal and underground comics and mainstream comics, and then times have sort of steadily changed what's worked, the evolution of different companies, the image boom and bust. You know, I remember talking to guys at Image, Jim Lee, when they wouldn't even go to press for a particular issue unless they had orders of 1 million copies. Death of Superman, 7 million copies. You know, people buying by caseloads. All the comic stores are run out of business, and the black and white boom and bust, the color boom and bust. But one of the things that I find interesting is the shrinking of our world and the comics in this medium that we love so much, and the exposure to, you know, when Frank Miller did Ronin, he was inspired by a lot of manga comics, Lone Wolf and Cub and things like that. now manga, if you go to Barnes and Noble, it's like you see the comic section there, and it's like the largest part of the comic section is manga. European comics have a presence, so you're starting to see all these different influences. And going back to, just thinking two things. One is how diverse it is right now, with so many companies doing so many things, from top shelf to owning to many genres and lifestyles and preferences, and so many stories that they would tell, that there's an audience for small press and people with original ideas, think of something that they can put out there as ideas of social media, build an audience, then put a digital comic and a printed comic. I was pitching, it's funny if you're talking about the Batman stories too, we did a Charles Batman crossover. It was one of my favorites, actually. That's the first time, my whole life I wanted to draw for Marvel at DC, and then finally the first thing I do is, I thought I was getting punked really, when they did, James Tinian wrote these beautiful Batman trope crossovers with Freddie Williams, who's local here. Love Freddie. I'm drawing Turtles and Batman on a cover book, and I'm just losing my fanboy shit because I'm like, I can't believe I'm drawing characters I co-created with Batman, one of my favorite characters.
How did Batman feel about that?
What's that?
How did Batman feel about like teaming up with Turtles?
Apparently you really liked it. They did 3 series. It was really wonderful. It was a big seller. It was a huge seller. Hats off to James Tinian, who not only did such a fantastic job crafting a script and making this work, because it's pretty tricky, and then Freddie just absolutely killing it in the art. So I was pitching mine. I know you're a fan of Commandy, and so I was pitching at Jim Lee. I cornered him at a private signing, CTC signing in San Diego. They said, my bucket list project is doing the Turtles Commandy crossover, because I think that's sort of the animal aspect of many things came from the early years of the Turtles. And Commandy, if you don't know, it's based on a Planet of the Apes type scenario that Jack Kirby expanded into this whole thing, which I really loved as a 12-year-old. And read them, and I keep having to go back to a 12-year-old self the way that Kirby wrote. So I pitched this idea, I said, 6 issues, Commandy Turtles, and this is what's going to be it. And then, we're going to pick some of the best Kirby issues instead of reinventing new way, and sort of retell the Kirby ones, including the Turtles that did this. And I was talking to this Katie Hewlett, and she's like, yeah, that's kind of interesting. We just need, we need some young person to draw it and write the story.
Oh, wow.
She goes, otherwise it's going to be for like 50, 60-year-old white guys. Those are the only people that are going to get it. That's the stuff that I was like, well,
They have money.
they have money, and
It is tough when they look at you and they instead of saying, yeah, you should do it, you're like, yeah, we'll get somebody to do it for you. Like, well, what, did you come in with a walker?
We've all had, had been part of best-selling things, and, I did this thing last Ronin, if you guys have heard of it, is basically as I continue as I continue to steal most of my career from Frank Miller. I wanted to do a Turtles version of Dark Knight with the Turtles. It was actually an idea that Peter and I had in 1987. And it was like, I think it's coming up, last year was still one of the best-selling. We outsold 17 other manga books, graphic novels. That was great. I'm a big fan of
They were terrible ones, though.
No, so it's funny that you go in to pitch, Commandy Turtle crossover, and you say, well, I had a really good selling book last year. We need another young people.
The continuity of thinking is tough, for people.
But it's a very long-winded way around to saying that what I'm excited about comics right now is the diversity in it, the opportunity within it, the things. And you look at this show, and I've been coming to Kansas City. I think you've been here quite a lot too. I have my 4th year.
Yeah.
And you got it's busier every year, and that's great. I know there's Celebrity Row and there's this, but there's still genre comic-based stuff and a lot of diversity to it, and that's really exciting.
I think we have time for a second question. Promise you?
Maybe.
You got one? Yes? Yes.
You kind of flowed into it earlier. I was just going to ask if there were particular editors that you enjoyed working with that gave you more freedom to do your creative ideas, as opposed to others you found more difficult to work with, where you had a lot of pushback.
Sure. Yes.
We have to name them.
I don't know if I can speak for everybody up here. I think I can. The best editors are the ones who realize that it is their job to help you tell the story that you're trying to tell. The worst editors are the ones who are telling you what story to tell and forcing you into doing it their way. And if they could do it, why aren't they writing? So, but by and large, I mean, with Jimmy, I know I've had good experiences. Jimmy's had some great experiences with guys and ladies doing these things, and yeah.
I think that editor-wise, my favorite editors that I worked with was Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, because they were totally we were self-publishing. We answered the phones, we packed the books, we shipped the orders, we answered the fan mail, and whatever we decided we wanted to put in our books, we put in our books. That was a favorite. But I've had, since selling materials and working for a lot of different companies, even at IDW, there's some really great editors that we worked with. But I worked with this editor once, and my favorite part, that he wouldn't support the story like you were talking about, like, here's a story you want to tell, and then he would tell you the story that he wants to tell, you to tell for him, and what he thinks works. And so and after about 6 or 7 months of talking to this person, and just wanted to climb through the phone and punch him in the face multiple times, I ended up, what's this guy's credentials? And so I went and read it. And the start of the biography was, I've been a storyteller my whole life. Now keep in mind, he was a junior editor for a long time, never wrote a single issue of anything, never did anything. And just, the biggest story you've ever told is on your bio. Fortunately, he's no longer there. I mean, you can sort of take the stories that you want, but you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I recently had somebody from the main company say, we want you and Amanda to do whatever you want, 4 issues, whatever you want. So Amanda and I said, all right, we just put a paragraph together. Here's what we want to, okay, can you make that, and can you change that? And I'm like, okay, you just literally said, do whatever we want. Yeah, but you know what? We don't want you to use that character, and we don't want you, plus, what you guys are thinking about doing, it's a little too, and I'm like, look. I said, let's just agree to not agree. And we just passed on the gig. Good gig. Normally, in the past, I might have taken it. But Amanda just looked at me and she's like, I don't understand. And I'm like, it's the reason why we crowdfund our books. I said, because, there's nothing worse than, especially with an artist, when they have their heart set on drawing something and then the editor says, no, you have to do something else. It kills them. It kills them because they're all so excited. You don't want to, especially we all work with art, of course you draw it. It's like there's nothing worse than killing an artist's soul like that. And they can't come back from it too well.
No.
And then they regret the job and resent it. And that's a horrible way to work, And then you guys can feel it because you're like, the heart really wasn't into that story.
Best editors I ever worked with were better writers. I mean, they were great editors, and then they said, hey, this is easy, I'm going to do it. And they went off and became best-selling writers of their own. It's very annoying. Oh, they also happen to be women, except for Archie.
Archie.
He cheated, he died.
All right, way in the back, we got a question. Yes.
How do you work in creative industries when you're told to embrace AI? You don't agree with the
We're never told to embrace AI. So in comics, some people use it, for things, but the companies they're not asking us to embrace AI yet. Not yet.
Not yet, but
Right.
they understand at this
AI is
point
in comics.
plagiarism software is what it
People
is.
use it for, some people use it for, so I know some artists use it that they'll put in like the characters or a situation and they'll get it and then they'll use the AI as a blueprint and then they'll work over that to do. I've seen that done.
Yeah, which is still
In
bullshit.
the old days, they used
What's
to
that?
Which is still bullshit.
photographs on
Yes,
it.
it's still bullshit, but I've seen people do it.
Yeah.
But no, we haven't had yet, and it will happen, by the
It will
way,
happen.
where they'll ask us to do it, but they won't ask us to do it. What they'll ask is an AI guy to make the comic. They won't ask us, right? Eventually that's going to happen. You're going to start, you guys see it on Instagram, you'll see AI stuff, and then every 6 months it's getting one step better, and one step. Look, there's a reason why the AI industry went to the government, asked them to take control of it and try to start regulating it, because they understand that if you replace 90% of the jobs in the United States with AI on some level, you're going to have a country of madness, right? People not working and everything. So they're asking the AI companies, because they can't regulate themselves because it's about money and it's about, they're asking the government to step in to regulate them, which is an interesting thing. That's all that stuff that was going on in the government. because they understand how potentially dangerous it is where everything is run by it. And I read a lot about it, you know, because I always say, like, technology usually is a tool. Like, there's just new tools, and you still need artists to use the tools. But unfortunately now with AI, it's like you don't have to do that. You don't have to have any skill except put a sentence together.
Well, it's more than that. It's that with AI, and for those who aren't familiar, we're talking about artificial intelligence, art prompts, where you can go and say, I want a picture of, you know, Joan Jett at the Grand Canyon or whatever. The problem is that the source material for all of that stuff is actual this work that artists have created out of their own head using their own skill. And it's scraping all of that stuff and using it to create new art, and that's why we call it plagiarism software, because it wouldn't exist without the people whose jobs are being, you know, are being replaced by it. So that's a real issue. So most artists that I know are really cautious about it and trying not to interact with it in any way unless to poison it. There are actually programs and stuff out there now that you can actually, like watermarking your photos, if you do that.
So you have to put a form in. So with Amanda, because you used to be able to write, you know, any character you want in Amanda kind of style.
Yeah.
And the AI would create something that it wasn't exactly Amanda, but it looked pretty close. And in your head, you think in another year they're going to nail it.
Yeah.
So we have to write forms that say they don't have permission to use our artwork. But it's like it's like a never-ending thing. It's like it's a whack-the-mole, you know, kind of thing. Where you just never. There's always 8 more companies that are using it and pulling it off the internet, and they're using people's names. Like they're using Frank Frazetta style car crash.
Right.
And it looks like a Frazetta painting in a weird way, and then people use it for their books or magazines. That's why there's less illustrators doing. Illustration is really taking a big hit.
Yeah.
And I noticed on the art collecting end, illustration prices has dropped, which is a really weird thing.
That's a very weird thing.
Yeah. And so like this is all like very dangerous stuff, and we're on a minor part, right? Because you already know AI in supermarkets. We use it in different things. It's, you know, but eventually it's like going to be scanning your eyes and all that kind of stuff. There is great stuff. That technology is great for medical science. I love it, AI for medical science, because it takes leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
But for illustration, it does put a lot of artists out of business, and it will.
Yeah.
And it will.
And writers eventually as well.
Oh, yes.
And after that, editors.
Editors. And then,
Yes, sir.
On top of that, you think of it to the point where there's so much AI that it actually makes it more valuable if the AI isn't being used?
there's a funny thing about collecting.
Food or non-GMO, like how
Yeah.
people actually flock to something that's actually generated by actually being.
Well, it's funny, right? Because comic book art is very popular. You guys see the prices on it, right? It's crazy. But there's an amount of people that do digital art now that there's no originals, and they're trying to sell digital prints. But it's not the same as having an original piece of art. At least I don't think so. So you start to see the prices go up because there's less original art being made, you know, classic original art. I just see it in that small snippet, but yes, in a way, but you know, think of how bad it has to get before that happens, and that's not a great place it's going. It just, like anything, it can be weaponized, any technology can be weaponized or used for good, and it's just an interesting time we're living in, because things are changing really, really quick, you know. Dun, dun, dun. Sorry.
You mean I'm sorry?
No, it's just funny. I was thinking about I was looking at the most recent Heritage auction catalog, and there's a page that I sold to somebody years ago, but I remember haggling with Steve Donnelly. It was a Daredevil page, and he wanted $165 for it. You know, we got it down to like 150. I think it sold for 65,000.
Yes.
Oh,
I have
and it's not,
it's crazy.
I co-founded actually with the co-directors of the Words and Picture Museum, Fiona Russell and Mary Ann, when we found that you did a signing in there.
Yeah, it was fun.
But it was all about comics as an art form. We were excited. So I'm thrilled that it's, you know, $60,000. Per page is going for $100,000, but it's like, you know,
Sure.
but that's the opposite side. You know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that want to rebuy their childhood. You guys know, I want to buy I want a Starlin page with Captain Marvel. Like, I'm always looking for that, and I always laughing that I can't afford it.
Yeah.
You know, can't afford it.
On the other hand, I have original script pages off a typewriter, so if anybody's interested.
See, I knew that. So,
Yeah, so I was thinking about what Chris said earlier about how like comics used to be fun, right?
Yeah.
And I know it still is for a lot of people, but there's also a lot of like drama in the publishing side of the community right now. And I'm seeing, I recently got to talk to a lot of the Ghost Machine guys through my outlet, and they're all like so excited about this new like collective. It kind of feels like what Image did back in the day when it like began to form.
Yeah, let me put some context to that real quick. And the Ghost Machine is Jeff Johns and several artists that he works with doing their own sort of sub-imprint at Image Comics. Yeah.
But I'm seeing, you know, Jimmy, you've been on Kickstarter, a big fan of crowdfunding and encouraging people to use the platform too. I heard from a publisher this weekend that you are talking to them too. So like, you're not opposed to the indie scene. Kevin, you and Avalone have Drawn Blood coming out. Mark, they recently, Boom recently got on Kickstarter.
On Kickstarter, yeah.
So there's still some fun to be had in the industry
No,
right now.
no, I was speaking from a purely personal and focused directive.
Okay.
I came of age in the 70s. It was a whole different world. I watched it evolve over the next 40 years. God help me, when I was an editor in the beginning, I actually helped make a couple of the decisions that moved that along, simply for what seemed then as practical. You know, it's like, rather than make a correction when the book was 30 seconds from going out the door, maybe we should read the script. Well, when you're making the decision, you know you're good. But 2 steps down the road, not so much. It's just everything evolves, like it or not. Sometimes you come up with a better airplane. Sometimes you come up with a contribution to the dumbest airplane designs in history. But you don't know. And it's like decisions that Shooter made that you can find creators hated them, did make a lot of money. Come back 10 years later, well, you didn't quite as much. Come back 20 years later, we're getting screwed. It's like you don't know. You're trying to find a balance, and it's hard. And it does leave scars. And, you know, for those of us who are foolish enough to be committed to one focus, i.e. a company, for a career, it requires interesting decisions that lead you down a different road than these 3 guys can go.
No, thank goodness for Kickstarter though. It is really safe, you know, our original crowdfunding source was my Uncle Quentin, who wrote a check for $1,200 to do the first issue.
Take that.
Yeah, we did.
Did he have a percentage?
No, we never gave him a percentage, but he was paid back. But no, it was great. But it is, you know, what I love about Kickstarter is it gives you that opportunity to come up with an original idea, and if you have a bit of a name, you have a social presence, and you can put it out there and do it, and raise it, and do an original creation that you still own the rights to.
Well, yeah, Jimmy, you've been probably one of the most successful comic creators to build something like it, which brings us back to the original question: how have things changed in the last,
Yeah, I've done 24 of them.
And talk a little bit about like the upside.
Yeah, so I was one of the first mainstream people to do it. So I was reading about it, and I said, let me try it, and I hit the goal. And then over the years, I figured it out, and I helped so many people do them. They do them so much better than me now, which is great. But for Amanda and I, we were like, well, we want to own our stuff, because we kept seeing things we do get made into TV shows and movies. And as creators, we're supposed to feel excited when we see our name in the thank you pile at the end of the film. Once we videotape it and slow it down so we can find our name. But we're supposed to be so over the moon with that. And when reality is, it's tough when you see 4 or 5 films based on something you did. And you get a pat on the back, and then you realize the guy on the set that drove one of the stars made like 10 times more than we did.
We got a better credit.
What's that? We got a better credits above ours. So over the years, I just said, well, I want to own my IP. I mean, originally, of course, I was doing that earlier with Event and stuff. But I found that we had an audience, like Amanda and I had an audience of people that would try stuff we do, and stuff that may not be in their realm of what they would normally buy. And I'm just like Kevin, I grew up on heavy metal and stuff, so my stuff tended to lean towards more an adult and a little crazier. But I realized that I only need maybe like 1,500 to 2,000 people that are willing to spend a little bit more on something I'm babysitting, because those books I babysit them. I go to printers, I do everything. But I realized, okay, it's very grassroots, and I'm always trying to grow that audience, but I realized I didn't need 100,000 people, or let's just say 60,000, because the companies, if you sell 60,000 comics, that's the first cent you get in royalty. It has to sell over 60,000 copies. How many books are selling over 60 these days? Not too many. So most of the times we don't get royalties from these books. And when I did a Kickstarter, I'm like, I work with other artists and they own the properties with me, and I ask them the question. I don't tell them how much I want to pay them. I say, how much would you like to get paid? Is the question I get to all my artists. What would you need to make you happy on this? And they're not used to that, and they look around suspiciously when they're saying it every time. But I'm like, no, just tell me what you need and I'll work it into the campaign.
Kiss perfected it early on. They were so far ahead of their time. They built what they call the Kiss Army, which is they always know they've got their 50,000, 100,000, whatever fans will buy anything they put out, any T-shirt, any merch, any albums, whatever. And so as long as you have that base, and Jim, you've got your base of whatever it is,
Yeah, they try to grow it
there all the time.
Yeah.
That's important, because you can make more money off of fewer people that way. And I don't mean that sounds greedy. What I mean to say is you make a living off of fewer people, because there's nobody else in the mix. There's no other company in the mix. There's no distributors in the mix. There's no roadblocks you remove between creators and people who buy from creators.
Yeah.
Everybody wins.
I mean, the downside is it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
Because the people that back my Kickstarters in this room know sometimes they get their boxes and I leave notes on the boxes or whatever. Me and my buddy Patrick pack up boxes for weeks. Sometimes it's like 1,000 boxes, but I know, like, I see the name on the box, I know that person, like they're back at my Kickstarter. And, again, it's a little bit more money, but it's TLC. I sit there and I babysit it and I make sure everybody's happy. And I've done 24, I've never not delivered the books. And I've never had complaints, and I always ask Kickstarter, can you do like a rating? Because I'd be so proud of a rating. What is this like, do we have to go?
I guess their way of holding up a time sign, yeah. Do you want to do we have time for like one more question? Who's got one? Catch us afterwards.
Okay.
All right, you.
I just had a very quick question for all of you, because you're talking about diversity in comic readership. Do each one of you have a favorite graphic novel or comic book that you would recommend for someone just getting into loving this art form?
Wow. We all gonna say like 5, so we'll try to
That was
think
not a
of
short.
I'll give you one. It's a book Humanoids did a few years ago called Louisa, Then and Now. Big, thick book. Mariko Tamaki wrote it. It's about, I don't want to give too much away, but I honestly think it's a very representational book. It's not about superheroes. It's about real people, and it's some magical realism to it. But it's really about how you move through the world as a gay teenager versus being a gay adult. So really good stuff.
I would recommend the first trade book, Marvel Knights, Black Panther, by Chris Priest and Mark Nexera. When we did Marvel Knights, we could choose any characters to do, and I grew up with Fantastic Four, so the other two titles we chose right away was Black Panther and Humans, because I love Fantastic Four. And I think the Black Panther book, I mean, it really did help get that movie made.
Well, because it was the first time written by
Yeah, by Stan Lee
Yeah,
and.
right, no, but for the first time, the book was written by a black man.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it was, Christopher Priest and Mark Texera drew it. I mean, they were buddies of ours, so
Yeah.
the secret to Marvel Knights is we hired our friends. That was pretty much it, that was the big secret, but I would recommend that.
Yeah, I'd say just one of the things I like to do is go to Barnes and Noble, and they have, it's one of the few bookstores out there that still supports a wide range of material. And it's like, you go to look for a new book to read, a novel, or something, you approach it the same way, or new music to listen to. Go in, look through, they have a big manga section, they have a big wide spectrum of comics from independents to the big two, Marvel, DC, and all that stuff. So just poke around and open some pages and read the backs of the books like you would to sort of take a chance. And I think you'll find something. I'm a big fan of anything like owning your top shelf or some of these small independent publishers who do some pretty interesting stuff.
Chris, any recommendations?
Well, half the stuff I recommend doesn't exist anymore. No, it's English.
Good one, Chris.
No, it's English and it's from the 50s.
They have nice
I like
collections
it.
of those too, I love those.
What?
They're still doing collections of some of the older classics.
Oh, no, I got it, it's just, it's not the sort of thing anyone over here would understand. I agree, probably just walk into a bookstore and just start looking, do what used to be done with prose. Find something you like, if you try the first page, if it leads you to the second or the third, go. I mean, being totally solipsistic, if I had to say, if you want what is for me one of the best exemplars of superheroes, go buy God Loves. Simply because God knows we need a little of that attitude, positive attitude now.
If you want,
God Loves Man Kills.
one last thing, if you want a little more focused, if you're going in and you feel overwhelmed, go to the YA section first. Because that's where the most diverse voices are being heard. That's where the most diverse material is coming out.
And then look for our names.
I think we're all going to our tables and beside.
Please, Chris. That was a great deal. Thank you so much. Kevin, I know you're crazy busy. You got 5 minutes.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Come on the table. No, I know we're doing get this out.
I'm